everyone, Comic Reviewer here. This time we're reviewing on The Karate Kid Part 2. Now, as you know, The Karate Kid Part 2 is a 1986 martial arts drama film, as well as being a sequel to the 1984 film The Karate Kid. Now, the premise of The Karate Kid is meant to take place 6 months after the events of the first film, where we see how after, now that Daniel and Ellie have separated, we see that Daniel is now staying with Mr. Miyagi after his mum gets a job in Fresno. And I think for the most part I would say we kind of see how Daniel now has a different chapter in his life, where his girlfriend's left him, his mum's got a different job somewhere, and we see how him and Mr. Miyagi seem like they've got everything back to where it used to be. Until we find out that Mr. Miyagi gets a letter from his dying father and heads to Okinawa Island to settle things there and there. And we kind of learn more about Mr. Miyagi's past, how he once had a close friend known as Sato, who now hates and despises him after something that happened, and an old love that he met, known as Yuki, who has more truths about her. And we see how Mr. Miyagi learns more about why Sato has been doing on Okinawa Island, as well as showing that he's kind of let his bitterness, his anger, his resentment get the better of him. And throughout the film, we see how Daniel gets amazed by Mr. Miyagi's homeland, and for the most part we see how Daniel ends up meeting a young woman there known as Kamiko, and I think for the most part their relationship do work. It's Daniel being amazed by her lifestyle, and Kamiko wanting to do something bigger and something different. And we kind of see how Daniel is amazed by the different environments, the different settings, and something different from his own soil, which I think does work. And this kind of reminds me when I went to China and being amazed by the different elements there, the different places, the different foods and restaurants. Something that kind of shows you a different breath of fresh air. And I think when you kind of got Sato's nephew chosen, it's kind of clear that Sato had morphed him into himself, and you can kind of tell Chosen lets his arrogance, his determination, and his loyalties blind him. And I think you can kind of tell that he's not really a bad person. He just kind of lets his loyalties, his sort of arrogance and that blind him. And I think for the most part I would say that, yeah, Daniel does cause some of the events to happen, but you can tell he doesn't do it unintentionally. I think there's been moments where Chozen does kind of cause them himself, but fails to realise it. And I think for the most part I would say Karate Kid 2 definitely has a bit of a message about fixing the past and trying to move on from things and being able to move on before it's too late. I think the difference between Mr. Miyagi and Sato was Mr. Miyagi did move on in his life and was able to kind of move past it thanks to Daniel and the people in his life. I think the point of Sato is that it was kind of clear that he was just too blinded by his own anger, resentment, bitterness, and all that, only to realise his mistakes near the end, and him saying that he was dead to Chozen was him wanting to distance himself from him, realising that he became a monster of hate and anger and regret. And I think there's been moments where we've let our anger, resentment, and kind of arrogance get the better of us. And I think that you can kind of tell, despite crossing so many lines, I think Sato does kind of realise his mistakes, only now realising how much his actions caused. And I think for the most part I would say Karate Kid 2 is a breath of fresh air. It gives you a different environment in Okinawa Island, showing you the different environments, different lifestyles of different people and how people have a different lifestyle to our own. So I think this film definitely deserves 2 thumbs ups. Still good and still alright. So, Comic Reviewer here, signing out.